Good afternoon. It's great to be here in Barcelona. So I flew in on a direct flight the other day. It was about 9 hours. And as I was flying, I was thinking that this experience has a lot in common with spaceflight. It was very uncomfortable, kind of cramped. The windows were too small. The food was okay. And it was very difficult sleeping. Now, imagine if that 9-hour flight is actually 5,000 hours instead. So that is actually 200 days. Which is the transit time between the Earth and Mars. It still will be a couple years, optimistically, before we're able to do this, but I believe we are rapidly accelerating, finally, towards making this vision a reality. We're not quite ready yet to build the massive starships and propel them into the solar system that you've so become accustomed to probably seeing in movies and futuristic TV shows. We're not going to have the personal living quarters, the lounges, the recreation areas, holodecks, and swimming pools that have been oftentimes portrayed. But we are currently accelerating towards making this a reality. I think the physics are there for it, just our understanding is not quite there yet. Current spaceflight was very similar to what we started out with roughly 50 years ago. So the systems, for humans at least, have not advanced that far along. I think hopefully, though, with a little creativity and advancement, we'll be able to move ahead and improve the conditions and make them better than that 9-hour flight. Now, historically, spaceflight has been restricted and kind of limited to the confines of governments and states. So they have been, existed at their mercy. And over the last decade, that has been changing. So there has been a new generation of visionaries, entrepreneurs, and actors that are moving forward with many of these plans and dreams that we've so often experienced. We'll take a moment and discuss some of these visionaries. So we have Elon Musk, who was mentioned earlier. So he has seemingly overnight reduced the cost of space launch by over 50%. You have Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who is investing $1 billion personally into his spaceflight company, Blue Origin. You have Yuri Milner, who has challenged the world to build the first interstellar spacecraft to travel to Alpha Centauri, albeit a very small spacecraft, is what he is envisioning there. You have Paul Allen, formerly of Microsoft. So he is building the largest airplane in the history of the world, called Stratolaunch, from which he plans to launch rockets from. And then Richard Branson has demonstrated his willingness and commitment to support the space tourism market. All of these individuals, beyond their wealth, have the experience and the capabilities to execute these grand visions and plans. Now, their confidence and dedication in these sectors has resulted in an influx of private capital. A recent study indicated that over 70% of recent space startup investment since 2000 has occurred within the last 5 years. 3 of those investments have exceeded $1 billion each. And this additional data I'm showing you shows the rapid increase in both the number of participants and the investment dollars over just the last 2 or 3 years. So this is bolstering confidence in investors to support these nascent businesses. It's also been a shift in the governments to support these kind of non-traditional space actors. So what are these applications? What are these new businesses? Under this, it's an umbrella we like to call commercial space. So there are a number of activities and developments for deploying mega constellations, which would result in hundreds or thousands of satellites orbiting the Earth, interconnected to provide high-speed internet services, readily accessible anywhere on the globe by anyone. There's also nanosatellite constellations that are being deployed. These systems would provide big data services, such as the Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communications, and healthcare industries. There's autonomous space-based medical research platforms that will result in new pharmaceuticals and drug therapies that have resulted from testing and maturing in the unique microgravity environment available only in space. There's activities for asteroid mining in search of precious new materials water that will result in new space-based services and economies here on Earth. So you may be asking now, what is bolstering this? How is this being made possible? We've talked about this for so long. Well, there's been a number of recent technology breakthroughs and advancements that the industry has waited for some time, and we've been talking about maturing these. We have the introduction of reusable launch systems, such as the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy from SpaceX. We have in-space inflatable habitats, such as the Beam from Bigelow Aerospace. That's currently undergoing testing on the International Space Station. We have niche technologies such as optical communications, which are providing a 20-fold increase in data transmission rates. We have safer nuclear power generation capabilities with lightly enriched uranium instead of weapons-grade materials. We have autonomous robotic systems that are being enhanced with artificially intelligent software. So these technologies are driving this revolution. Now, that's all on the engineering side and the hardware systems. The human system, we continue to learn and progress through our testing on board the International Space Station, but we still need to address and solve key issues related with medicine, physiological and psychological issues associated with long-duration spaceflight. So issues such as bone loss, muscle atrophy, recently necessarily discovered, but identified issue with increased intracranial pressure, which is causing long-term vision damage in some of the astronauts due to the microgravity environment. We have a lack of understanding in exposure to radiation, acute radiation exposure from galactic cosmic radiation, solar particle events, and that's its impact on the central nervous system. Understanding the impact of microgravity on pharmacokinetics. So these are the challenges and where we need to progress. The technologies and solutions for these introduce a number of questions in terms of how will we test them, particularly in space. Are there any ethical considerations? A number of the potential solutions have been mentioned earlier today. Is it just new pharmaceuticals, 3D printing of organs and tissues, gene editing, nanotechnology, artificial wombs, or human stasis? So these are the questions and on the medical aspects that need to be solved and addressed if we're going to continue to reduce the launch cost and the access for space. Now, I'll give you one example of how a medical system, and kind of a focus there, can influence all the engineering hardware and ultimately reduce the launch costs. So under a grant funded by NASA, my team has been developing technology to put the Mars-bound crew in a deep sleep torpor-like state for the transit phases of the mission. So we're accomplishing this, we plan to accomplish it through leveraging approaches from therapeutic hypothermia and some new pharmaceuticals to suppress the thermoregulatory system to render the crew inactive during this transit phase. We're currently hoping for a minimum of 14 days. Longer is better if we can get to the entire transit phase. That 200 days I mentioned, then we can get even more benefit to the system. We're only targeting a 32-degree core temperature, and with that, we get significant reduction in the metabolism. That yields reductions in consumables. We can put the crew in a smaller habitat. We can eliminate a number of systems, and it reduces the overall power levels. So all those things compound, and ultimately, compared to the NASA reference design, our engineering analysis indicates a 50% reduction in the habitat mass. So I know of no other singular technology on the engineering side that could have this sort of impact. So, not just focusing on keeping the crew healthy, there's potential engineering benefits that can be obtained by kind of looking at this human system. So, all right, before we get into maybe the how and the when, I think we should look at a little bit of the why. Sometimes we'll be asked, why should we be doing this? So is it in the interest of international cooperation, the strategic military value of these things? Is it just human nature to explore? Is it for just scientific knowledge? So these debates have occurred in multiple forms. I think we could spend the rest of the week examining the rationale for the human exploration and settlement of space. I don't really think there are any wrong answers. Personally, I believe we need to become a two-planet species in order to ensure our long-term survival. So recent estimates have put the incidence impact rate of, say, a 500-meter diameter asteroid at about once every 140,000 years. That is not a long time by universal scales. It may seem like a long time right now, but an asteroid of that size would result in millions of deaths and regionally devastate an area of the planet. So we currently estimate there are 3,000 to 4,000 of these objects in the Earth. Now, fortunately, we've been doing a much better job over the last 50 years of identifying the near-Earth asteroids stuff, so you can kind of see the progress. I don't know if that maybe makes you feel better that we've found this many, or it may make you feel worse that there's that many out there. So, but regardless of this, the asteroids, we may have the option of shielding or deflecting them. There's a variety of approaches that are being pursued, but when it comes to a rogue comet, less frequent, but much more unpredictable, won't have lead time, those will always threaten life here on Earth. So a little bit with that justification, we'll talk a little bit about where I see us moving to. So in the 2020s, as commercial businesses are focused on operations in cislunar space, we're going to move out from low Earth orbit and conducting operations on the International Space Station. We will move forward with small lunar bases, outposts, and gateways in lunar orbits, and Lagrange points. So this will result in thousands of people working in space to support mining, power generation, and in situ resource utilization, such as subsurface ice and obtaining water from the moon. Now, in support of this, the European Space Agency has been announcing some of their plans and ideas for development of a lunar village. So NASA is proceeding with procurements for the first element of a deep space gateway. Blue Origin has just very recently began promoting or pushing for the development of a new cargo lander that would be facilitated through a public-private partnership with NASA. So, and then you have programs like the Google Lunar X Prize, which are offering $20 million purse to the first robotically landed rover on the moon. Now, space tourism will also play a critical role here. That's been a great market, particularly for getting investors, and kind of seemingly unlimited potential of people that would like to travel. As we continue to reduce launch costs and improve our ability to reuse assets, future tourists may be able to take a one-week vacation, kind of circumnavigate the moon, basically replicate the Apollo 8 mission, potentially a 2-week vacation that would involve small surface stays, potentially to visit Apollo historic sites. So I believe this will be coming. It will take a little while before we realize the space tourism market, but I do think we'll see the first lunar tourist within the next decade. Right. As the commercial space and businesses are focused on operations in cislunar space around the Earth, in the 2030s, we'll see the first scientific manned exploration to Mars. So these will be internationally led missions facilitated by world space agencies. Now, it will be a few missions before we actually can go to the surface of Mars. These initial precursor missions will involve going to the Mars moons Phobos and Deimos. You may ask, why would you want to go to the moons? Mars is right there. Well, that significantly reduces the costs, and with a presence on the Mars moons, we can conduct live, real-time telerobotic operations of surface assets. So it took us many years and multiple missions to conduct the science data that we have from Mars using the rovers, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, such. With the local presence from the crew on the Mars moons, we would be able to conduct that research in a matter of days and weeks compared to many years. So there's a lot of scientific value that could be gained while reducing the costs. This is also kind of a footprint, initially getting into Mars and understanding how to operate in the space environment. So building upon that success, I think we'll see the first manned Martian footprints on the surface of Mars in the late 2030s. It's the current time frame. Critical to keeping the costs down, maintaining the industrial base, we'll be conducting these missions in rapid succession. We can't afford to have 10 years between these missions. We must go at every opportunity between the Earth and Mars, and those occur at about a 2-year intervals. So the first manned mission to the surface will entail a crew of 4, international crew of 4, traveling 6 months out to Mars. They would stay on the surface for a 500-day science mission that would have been a pre-deployed base, and then they would return and have a 6-month return journey to the Earth. So when they return, they won't be coming home like maybe the Apollo missions did. You won't return directly to the Earth. You will actually go into orbit around the moon. This reduces the energy requirements required, and it also gives us opportunity to recover the spacecraft, recover a lot of the hardware. Again, all reducing the costs of supporting these missions and setting up for long-term sustainability. Building upon that, in the 2040s, I believe we will see the first permanent settlement on Mars. So these crews will build with a 2-year replenishment and crew rotation cycles and gradually expand about that base. Through the prior missions, we would have established the optimal location, kind of balancing the scientific interest area of the site, the access to subsurface materials and resources to harvest, as well as just the overall access point from orbit. So these crews will be required to develop their own access water, oxygen, as well as grow food as they learn to live off the land. Now, critical to maintaining that settlement and continuing to expand it, we'll be addressing the crew health care and ability to provide critical care medicine. So they will operate with a scarcity of blood supply, pharmaceuticals, even some basic medical equipment. They will have to address challenges of how to reproduce and grow before we can move forward at that point. So these are some of the key challenges that we'll be facing as we position ourselves going to a permanent presence. After that, I think we can continue to grow the population. The minimum population size required has been estimated that we will need 10,000 people in order to have long-term viability and survivability on the planet. So it will take some time before we are able to achieve those numbers. So that's a lot of people to transport. But over time, we'll transition from these 2-year recycling missions to one-way trips. Ironically, these one-way missions are significantly easier to conduct than the round-trip missions. They require a lot less hardware, a lot smaller systems. So with these round-trip missions, with these one-way missions, we'll be able to significantly grow that population. Eventually, we will result in the first generation of Martians on the planet. So it sounds crazy, but eventually you will have a populace that is natively born and grown there. That will test our understanding of reproduction and human growth. They will emerge having grown up in a reduced gravity environment, Mars 3/8G, potentially exposed to higher radiation levels. So we're going to need solutions there from the surface. But I'm confident that over time, we will become a 2-planet species and be able to achieve this. So space will provide unlimited opportunities for everyone. I think every industry, sector, and country of the world. I think it's unlimited opportunities. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I hope this is giving you something a little more to think about during your time here this week. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. We've received some interest. People are keen to join your mission, but they're very very reassured to see that you're planning to bring them back first. One key question, what if the Martians make it to Earth before we land to Mars?
I don't know how to respond on that one. Yeah, so fortunately, we have yet to identify any past or extant life yet on Mars stuff. So I think the possibility still is slim.
But on a more serious note, what do you see the main challenge of healthcare provision during such a mission?
Main challenges will be, again, I think muscle atrophy and bone loss, maintaining that will be a challenge. It's one of the approaches that we're seeing, or benefits that we see from this cooling, is it opens up options for different approaches there with the crew in a inactive state, potentially neuromuscular stimulation be applied. There's interest or potential for radioprotective effects from radiation while being cooled. So we think actually transmitting or sending crews there in the inactive state will eliminate a number of these challenges. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much to John and all the speakers for an inspiring session. Thank you so very much.